Welcome to Don't Be Caged by Your Age, Frank King. I'm so happy you're here. How are you?
I am 151 pounds of pink steel and sex appeal.
Listeners, Frank is known as the mental health comedian. He's a suicide prevention speaker, was a writer for The Tonight Show for 20 years, and has been a speaker and comedian for 38 years. And he's shared the stage with many comedians, including Jeff Foxworthy, Adam Sandler, Jerry Seinfeld, Ellen DeGeneres, as well as entertainers like Lou Rawls, the Beach Boys, Randy Travis, and Nancy Wilson. His speaking on suicide prevention is informed by his lifetime battle with depression and suicidality, and he has turned that long, dark journey of the soul into 12 TED Talks. That's so amazing. Sharing his life saving insights with colleges, corporations, and associations. And on top of that, he has survived two aortic valve replacements, a double bypass, a heart attack, and losing to a puppet on the original Star Search. Oh my gosh, Frank, you are so amazing. So happy.
Agreed.
When I was doing my research, I came across a quote that you shared, which I absolutely love. It says, "If I don't change my mind, I'm going to lose my mind." Perfect. So, Frank, let listeners know your age and where you are hailing from.
67 and a half, and I am about 25 minutes just outside of Eugene, Oregon.
Beautiful part of the world. So, Frank, in the age of where there's a lot of toxic masculinity, it has been pretty prevalent in American culture. What compelled you to get up on stages and share your stories with humor about depression and suicidality? That took a lot of courage, and you really were carving out a pathway that many folks would not do.
True. Well, people ask me, how'd you pick suicide as a topic? Well, tell you the truth, the topic picked me. Depression and suicide run in my family. It's called generational depression and suicide. My grandmother died by suicide. My mother found her. My great aunt died by suicide. My mother and I found her. I was 4 years old. I screamed for days. And I came close enough in 2010 in the last recession to ending my life that I can tell you what the barrel of my gun tastes like, literally.
Wow.
Spoiler alert, I did not pull the trigger. A friend of mine heard me say that at a keynote recently, and he came up because he'd never heard me say I didn't pull the trigger. And he said, and I quote, "Hey man, how come you didn't pull the trigger?" I said, "Hey man, could you try to sound slightly less disappointed?"
Oh my gosh. And you have this innate ability to turn something really dark and really something so inappropriate that that gentleman said into where I wanted to laugh out loud. What is it about you? How did your life inform you in such a way that you are able to bring humor to such a difficult and dark topic?
Well, I live with two mental illnesses, major depressive disorder and chronic suicidal ideation. And my third TEDx talk was mental benefits, the evolutionary advantages of mental illness. Because I kept running into people who had a mental challenge, but they also had other amazing superpowers. I think my comedic ability is simply the flip side of my depression and thoughts of suicide. And told my first joke in the fourth grade, 9 years old. Kids laughed. Teacher was hysterical. She was laughing so hard she had to excuse herself to go to the teacher's lounge. And years later, I saw her at the Winn Dixie grocery store in Raleigh, North Carolina, my old hometown. I said, "Mrs. Dark, why did you go to the teacher's lounge?" She goes, "Frank, that was the funniest thing a child had ever said to me before or since." And I was laughing so hard, I was afraid you would misinterpret that and it'd break your heart. So I excused myself. And then she said, "So what are you doing these days?" I said, "I'm a stand up comedian." She said, "Oh, duh."
No surprise there. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. And yes, because of people like you, Frank, we are able to talk about suicide with much more compassion and empathy and knowledge because you take that humor and you use it to educate people, right? And we all know that if you can make people laugh while you're giving them information, it'll stay for a long time because you have left them with a wonderful feeling. Maya Angelou, right? People will always remember how you made them feel, but at the same time, by paving the way, by being so open and honest, what we're seeing now in obituaries of people who have taken their life instead of died suddenly or things like that, they're being also more open and honest that the person succumbed to their depression through suicide.
Yes, my job basically, is to start the conversation on suicide. That's what most of my clients say. We just brought you in here to start the conversation on suicide because what I discovered, Andy, when I was preparing for my first TEDx talk was that even though one person dies by suicide every 9 minutes in the US, every 40 seconds worldwide, hardly anybody talks about it unless you bring it up. And then almost everyone has a story. And so by going on stage, by being vulnerable, I believe, as Brene Brown does it, vulnerability is a speaker superpower. She said this, and I've said it many times, but not quite as eloquently. She said, I am so comfortable in my darkness, I can sit comfortably with you in yours. That's my job. And oftentimes when I speak, well, pretty much every time I speak, I do a Q&A, a general Q&A at the end. But before I start that, I say, look, if you have a question you'd like to ask or a story you'd like to share and you don't want to share it with everybody, I'll hang out an extra 30, 45 minutes and take those individually. And sometimes it's two people, sometimes it's 10. And most of the conversations start like this: Frank, I've never told anybody this. Yeah, I get that a lot. What
I
I've
bet
done
you
is
do.
I've given them permission to give voice to their feelings and experiences surrounding depression, thoughts, suicide without recrimination. I mean, I was in Cincinnati on a job site for a construction company doing a suicide prevention in construction keynotes. Construction has the worst rate of suicide of any industry in the US. 1,000 people last year died of accidents in construction, 6,000 died of suicide.
Wait, Frank, that is so news to me.
Yep.
Why is that?
Well, in part because it's male heavy. And 8 out of 10 people who die by suicide in the US at this point in time are men, and toxic masculinity has a lot to do with it. They don't want to share their feelings. They're men. They gotta be tough.
Absolutely. Wow. I have a fellow podcast host, Andy Grant. He has a wonderful podcast called Real Men Feel. This is so important, and it's
Mm.
especially important with you up there. Your testosterone is rocking it. So you show up, people go, okay, I identify with him. And then you give them that permission. You give them that safety zone to want to talk about it because, as you know, once you start talking, you can find ways to navigate, hopefully, and manage the thoughts of suicide. And we have indoctrinated beliefs inside us where I don't know about you, but I heard it a lot growing up. Oh, how could that person be so selfish and kill themselves?
One is, and I hear that, it's a selfish act. It is from the outside looking in. However, in suicidality, there's something called burdensomeness. Burdensomeness. I felt they feel often that they're a burden to their family, their friends, to society,
Yeah.
that the world would be better off without them. So it's actually unselfish from the inside looking out. It's irrational, but unselfish. The other thing you hear is why would someone want to kill themselves? I would hypothesize that the majority of people don't want to kill themselves. I didn't want to kill myself. I simply wanted to end the pain. And that's the only way I could see to do it.
What do you attribute your ability to navigate and keep going even when you had the taste of the gun in your mouth?
Well, I didn't pull the trigger because it was a very practical reason. We had filed bankruptcy. My wife was devastated, and I had $1 million life insurance policy. So I thought I can fix it. The world would be better off. She would be better off, at least financially, without me. I was worth more dead than alive. So what saved me was I contacted my insurance agent to find out how long I'd had the policy because I had sold insurance right out of college, and I knew most policies have a 24-month, 2-year suicide clause. If you kill yourself in less than 2 years, it pays nothing. If you kill yourself 2 years and a day, it pays $1 million. And as luck would have it, I'd only had the policy for 22 months. I had to wait 60 days to kill myself. That's why I'm still sitting here.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Before the last session, there was some stigma wrapped around bankruptcy, but after the last session, pretty much everybody you bump into, oh yeah, I did. Oh yeah.
Yeah. No, it did make it a lot easier. I am just in love with your work in the world. I love how you are helping people understand suicide, depression from the male perspective, something that we rarely talk about. I'd like to talk about how, as we age, as folks get past the age of 65, according to the National Council on Aging, while older adults comprise of about 70% of the population, they make up approximately 22% of suicides.
Mhm.
And so that's thousands of people who are taking their lives. Now, how much of that might be suicide assistance because they're ill?
Mhm.
But a lot of it can also be due to isolation, loneliness. They've been kicked out of their jobs because of this ageism that we have in our society. They may have the physical challenges, of course, but they're no longer connected. Frank, talk about what you have seen with the aging population around suicide.
Well, baby boomers specifically,
Hmm.
I think part of the problem is there are a number of factors. Baby boomers, they were going to change the world. That's my generation. We were going to change the world. I wasn't in the generation that protested the Vietnam War, but the people who were older than I,
Yeah.
they brought that war to an end, and they were going to continue and change the world. And now looking back in their 60s, early 70s, they're thinking, I sold insurance all my life. I really didn't change the world.
Right.
Also, there people think that most of the manufacturing jobs went overseas. Only about 15-20% of the manufacturing jobs went overseas. The other 80 to 85% were taken by AI and robotics. So if you have a man, let's say, who was a shop steward in a manufacturing plant, making good middle class wages one day, next day the job's gone. He's no longer that. Men tend to tie their identity to what they do for a living. So to be cast adrift, in your mid 40s, mid 50s can be very depressing and begin a horrible cycle down from there. So that's another factor in,
Sure.
yeah. So it's, I think I think part of the answer is to find purpose after or at any age, find your
Yeah.
purpose. I coach speaking in TEDx, and my advice to them is take your pain and turn it into passion, your passion into purpose, your purpose into profit. Figure out what it is that you are passionate about and and see if you cannot make a living doing that.
Absolutely. And listeners, you can learn and do these things. You can find a way. You can hire Frank or someone else to help you get that speech together, help you write that book. How, Frank, would you suggest folks to do what you call mental ableness? So, what does that mean? And how can folks get better at mental ableness as they go through these really difficult times?
Well, I had a speech during the pandemic I did online, a keynote called Social Distancing and Staying Sane. Don't worry so much about your mentally ill friends. Because I got together with a couple of my mentally ill friends during the pandemic, and we all agreed that we were sailing through it because we all had one thing in common besides a mental illness, and that was a self care plan. So, what I did in that keynote was I taught people how to create a self care plan. Whether you are neurotypical or whether you're neurodiverse, whether you live with mental illness or you don't, I think you should have a daily self care routine and one non negotiable element of that. And what I would give as an example of mine was diet. I'm on the keto diet and I do some intermittent fasting. Exercise. I exercise 6 days a week at a minimum. And you've seen my photograph from my last bodybuilding contest. And the diet, exercise, good night's sleep. I think people discount, Andy, a good night's sleep. They take pride in I can get by on 2 hours sleep a night. Oh, dear Lord. I'd much rather you say to me, Frank, man, I nailed 8 hours last night. That because sleep is restorative. So diet, exercise, good night's sleep, medication. I take a little bit of medication for my depression and meditation. I do this thing called the cat napper. It started out years ago as a cassette tape and then a CD and now an MP3. It's a 31-minute guided meditation. It takes you down, relaxes you, and then brings you back up the other side. When you awake, you'll awake refreshed. And I do that after each meal. And I've been doing it for years. Again, I think napping, the siesta is a lost art.
It Certainly is, and especially for our generation that came out of the '80s hustle culture, and many other folks who continue to think that you've gotta work nonstop 24/7. Rest is resistance, folks.
Because I'm a comic. I cannot be a morning person. And for my mental health and physical health, I finally gave in to my circadian rhythm. Somebody said, "How long you been up this morning?" I said, I woke up at 1. 1? I said, "Well, I went to bed at 6:30."
Yeah,
So I I that those are my best time is from 1 in the morning till about 9 in the morning. It's just the way, and 6.5, by the way, is my magic number as well. I don't need 8.
yeah,
And there's a study that said it's not often it's not the number of hours, it's going to bed at the same time.
that's it
They
100%.
During the pandemic, they interviewed a guy who was in the space station, the previous astronaut in the space station. He'd been up there a year, and the only time he ever saw anybody else when they brought up groceries. So he was isolated. And they said, "How in the world do you survive that kind of social isolation?" And he said one word: routine. I go to bed same time, get up same time, eat same time, binge Netflix same time, work out same time. So that's part of what I recommend is get a routine.
Yes,
And
yes.
by the way, my non-negotiable, I think everybody, and I got this from one of my clients, Jared Bendafala. He has the 5 pillars to mental wellness. One of them is a self-care plan. And in that self-care plan, a non-negotiable. If you don't do anything else that day, he journals. Regardless of what else he does that day, he journals. I go to the gym. That's my non-negotiable. And I use a technique they call gamification, meaning I make a game of it. If I'm depressed and feel like I can't drag myself the 25 minutes into town, the game is if I get to the gym all dressed out, go in and do one rep of one exercise, I can turn around and go home. Now, I've never done that. By the time I get there, I usually end up spending about 90 minutes, but I can, if I want, go do one bicep curl, get back in the car and go home. So, and if I can't get out of bed because I'm depressed, I make a literal to-do list, physical with a pen and paper, 6 things to do that day. And the game is once I finish number 6, scratch it off. I don't care if it's 3 in the afternoon, broad daylight. I can go back to bed, pull the covers over my head, and binge watch the next season of Reacher or whatever it happens to be. So it's a game. You make a game with a reward because I believe motion is not curative, but forward motion is therapeutic.
It
Just
really is. And what you just and listeners, please take this in. This is the tiny habits as well. You do that one little thing for even just a few minutes. How about some celebration on that, right? You can go back to bed, you can turn around and go back home from the gym,
Mhm.
whatever. That anchors it in and it provides what? What does that do for your mental health, Frank?
Well, it gets me moving.
Yeah.
It gets me to the gym every day. As I said, I have pulled that I have used it once. I flew to Chicago. I was speaking at a national osteopathic convention, and I got there 6 in the evening, and I hadn't done my workout yet. So Hilton had a nice gym, so I went downstairs. I love the elliptical runner. So I got on the elliptical, and I started, and I thought, "Man, all I wanna do is go to bed." So I did a minute on the elliptical. Done. Next morning, I'm up before the crack of dawn, did an hour on the elliptical, but that's the deal. What got me to the gym was I knew if I just did a minute, I could go back to bed, which is what I really wanted to do. So it's just a way to keep moving forward. But
Yeah, and I also think that having that non-negotiable, when you meet it, you are in integrity with yourself.
and feeling morally superior.
Right? Yeah, you kept your agreement with yourself. You kept your promise, and that can be very powerful and empowering, right?
And people say to me, "Do you lift a lot of weights?" No, I don't lift a lot of weight. I lift weights a lot, which I think is the key. I believe consistency is far more powerful than commitment. Being consistent, just getting there.
Absolutely. And this is a perfect segue into what is fueling your passion today. You have got to share with everyone how you are glowing and growing as you age and thrive after 65.
Yes, I always want to be a bodybuilder. And if you're of an age, you remember comic books. In the back, there was an ad for the Charles Atlas bodybuilding. where there's a little skinny guy on the beach and a big muscle guy kicks sand into his face. And so I always want to do that. But I knew being slightly built that I didn't have a chance in my 20s, 30s, 40s. I realized if I waited till I was 60, then I bet you everybody else has quit. And sure enough, pretty much, I just did a contest July 27th, my fifth. It's called True Natural, meaning they polygraph you beforehand and urine test you after to make sure you're not doing some performance enhancing substances. And there were two of us over 40, me at 67 and Harold at 80. So where were the rest of the guys and women? Same thing. There were very few women over the age of 40.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I guess my prediction was correct. I bet everybody else has given up. My goal is I came in third in the novice bodybuilding this year, and my goal next year is to finish first in the over 40 category and get my professional bodybuilding card.
Congratulations. That's huge. I have a couple questions about that because from what I've watched with my friends who have done, sort of the women who have done their bodybuilding contests, and they just loved it and they were so committed. It really juiced and jazzed them up. They had to have a specific diet. I mean, there was some real sacrifice there. And boy, they had to get their water in, their protein in. How are you managing that?
Well, Schwarzenegger said years ago, although he did steroids, he said years ago, and it's sound advice, stay hungry. So I operate on 1,000 calories or fewer a day, and I eat the same thing all 3 meals: boiled shrimp, boiled egg, non-fat yogurt, boiled shrimp, boiled egg, yogurt
For how
for
long?
months. I had pizza on the Monday after the Saturday bodybuilding contest. I had pizza, double
Yep.
cheese, sausage, hamburger, cheese injected into the crust. Tuesday, back on 1,000 calories, and I'll be doing that until next July. Actually, October 5th, the guy who ran the contest here in Eugene has another contest that he took over in Vancouver, Washington, which is 2.5 hours away. So I sent him a Facebook message, Aaron, how many old guys you got? He wrote back sadly, one. I said, all right, fine.
I'll do
So
it.
went ahead and registered for that one because there's one other guy. I can't. Oh, it didn't seem. A, I like to help Aaron out. He's a great guy. B, you should have somebody to compete with.
Right, absolutely. And Frank, yeah, and listeners, I've got the photos. It's extraordinary. Frank is really doing it. But, just like women, sometimes they need hormone replacement therapy. What about guys? Because can muscles still get built the way they used to before you lost your testosterone or your testosterone decreased?
Well, I think so. If you showed the photograph, I think
That's without any hormone replacement therapy?
no, it's just good hard work, good diet, good night's sleep.
Oh my gosh, Frank. Listeners, seriously, Frank is built. He is your bodybuilder and 67 and a half. Phenomenal, Frank. Way to go. Here are the clappers for that because that's a real commitment to not just lifting weights. You lift a lot of weights, but to know what specific muscles to do all of that. And then the eating. I am in awe and wonder of you. Frank, what advice do you have for folks to help them from being caged by their age, to help them dissolve those internalized ageist beliefs that tell them, oh, they're too old to do that?
Well, I, I'm sure there are people who would suggest, wait a minute, 67 and a bodybuilding contest. And I must tell you, Andy, it is exciting and terrifying in the same moment. Men oftentimes have dreams. I don't know if women do, but men have a very common dream where they're outside in public in their underwear for no apparent reason. And in the afternoon, after you do the competing happens in the morning, you get judged. In the afternoon, it's a show for the audience. And you're required to do a 1 minute routine to music, flexing in essentially panties. I mean, almost a thong.
Yeah.
So to be on stage in front of 200 strangers in essentially really skimpy underwear, and I can't say anything, because it's
So
not,
there's no comedic relief.
no, although I try to be comedic in my last two contests. the music I chose was Kung Fu Fighting. Most of the people choose a rock anthem of some kind. And so I did a Taekwondo kata in, in 4 different directions as they do and flexed in and the way I closed it was, and a friend of mine gave me the idea. He said, "Frank, here's how you close out." He said, "When you turn back to the audience and it's almost over, you do the crane from the original Karate Kid." And the audience went nuts.
Oh my gosh, I love that. That's
What?
entertainment.
Yeah, I do try to make myself a little little bit, and I bought some training nunchucks,
That's
so
right.
next year, I'm gonna break out the nunchucks for my
Oh, you are having too much fun. This is a really good fit for who you be. I love it. Thank you so much. And I'm so delighted you joined me. Listeners, I will have all the links so you can find Frank. Frank, is there a link to one of your poses for after the show? Do you have a video for that as well?
Oh, you mean a video of me doing my posing? I bought being a little vain, I bought the video and photo package. It has not arrived yet. I got some photos from a friend who took the one I sent you.
Well,
She's
good.
she's the one who made those trunks I'm wearing, actually. They're handmade.
This is wonderful. We'll be looking for that, but listeners, don't worry, you're gonna be able to listen to all of the TED Talks and the incredible work that Frank has done to help lighten the load from being human and helping to dissolve not only ageism, but dissolve the toxic masculinity that we have that prevent men from sharing their feelings and their depression and how hard it is to be a guy. It's okay.
And when you see the picture that Andy posts, look carefully at my chest because you can see the titanium twist ties that are holding my rib cage together. And a lot of times people who have heart surgery, be it bypass
Right.
or valve job or whatever, feel like life is over. They can't be in the shape they were in previously. If you are careful and under the care of your cardiologist, you can lift weights. You can do an aerobic exercise. I mean, it is possible to get back in shape and back into life. And I've had 2 aortic valve replacements, double bypass, and a heart attack.
And
And
how are your doctors feeling about this diet? Well, they probably like the diet for you.
yes, well, I am my cardiologist's favorite patient. I am his poster boy. As soon as I got done with the contest and my friend sent me that photo, I texted it to him because unlike a lot of his patients who go in,
Mhm.
get the bypass, swear up and down they're going to change their ways. 5 years later, they call them frequent flyers. They're back
Mm.
because they think of it like plumbing. Just fix it
Yes.
again. So I am his favorite patient.
Oh my gosh. I totally forgot listeners to bring up the fact that he'd had all this surgery in his heart, and yet he was out there doing bodybuilding and speaking and doing all the things. Thank you for bringing that up, Frank. And we will
Sure.
look for those titanium.
Twist ties. Oh yeah, it's when you can't see them if you have over like 8% body fat, but I'm lean enough you can go, damn, those I can see those.
Wow. I think that is so extraordinary. Listeners, we want to hear from you. If you have any questions for Frank or you want to share your thoughts about this conversation, hop on over to Instagram or LinkedIn or right on the website. You can leave a comment or tap the mic and leave a voice message for me. How cool is that?
That's
I'd
cool.
love to hear from you and keep the conversation going. I am so grateful for your time today, Frank. Thank you so much for joining me. And thank you for helping listeners have representation so that they can let those internalized ageist beliefs go and not let them prevent them from pursuing new dreams and opportunities. I'm grateful for your time and presence on the Don't Be Caged by Your Age podcast.
Can I close it like a comedian would close it out?
Please.
All right. If you enjoyed the podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe, and tell your friends. If you did not enjoy this podcast, well, we hope you have no friends.
That is perfect. Oh my gosh. I'm going to try that now from and everybody will know that was from Frank King. Until next time, listeners, I'm wishing you all a delicious day. Thank you for tuning in. And as Frank said, rate, review, and subscribe. And just keep your glow out there in the world. We want you. We need you. You're still so important. Thank you, Frank.
You're welcome.
Listeners, I'm so grateful you carved out time to tune in and grab the gems from this delicious conversation. Be sure to hop on over to Don't Be Caged by Your Age on LinkedIn or Instagram to share your thoughts about ageism and unretirement. Because in this space, your age doesn't define you, it refines you. If you are inspired by a story you hear, it would mean the world to me if you would subscribe, share, rate, and review the podcast. To receive an alert whenever a new show is posted, please join the Don't Be Caged by Your Age newsletter. Every month, you'll receive links to the podcast and helpful resources for creating possibilities for your unretirement days. Thank you for tuning in. I am so excited to hear how you found ways to thrive after 65. Waving from Boston, cheers.